Welcome to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's live streaming interview series, where leading new thought teachers, speakers, and authors share the intimate stories behind the 10 best spiritual books that inspired them the most on their spiritual journey. From well-known classics to hidden gems you might never have heard of, the No BS Spiritual Book Club saves you time and money by sharing reliable recommendations from those who've walked the path before you. The No BS Spiritual Book Club, the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to inspire your own journey of self-discovery. Here's your host, founder of the No BS Spiritual Book Club, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello and welcome. Joining us today to share the 10 best spiritual books that inspired her life journey is Paulette Pipe, an ordained unity minister and a meditation teacher who's presented at and led meditations for such events as both the IONS and Parliament of World World Religions Conferences, the Stand Up for Humanity event, and various unity functions. Paulette is also a retreat facilitator and a podcast host, and the founder of Touching the Stillness Ministries. And she's a professional keeper of the flame for the Evolutionary Leaders Circle and the Holomovement. And we're going to find out about the Stillness Ministries and how you get to be a keeper of the flame a little bit later in the show. Paulette, welcome.
Thank you, Sandie. It's such a joy to be here.
It's good to have you. In your written description, you wrote that whittling down your vast library of spiritual books since embarking on the path to awakening and seminary would be like hacking away at a mountain with a penknife. That's a great visual. How did you resolve that problem?
Well, I decided that I would pick out the books that were, or some of them, that were most pivotal on my journey from grief to grace. And it all began with my brother, Peter, who died suddenly at the age of 33. And I just had no frame of reference for losing a sibling. So I was off my rocker, as we say in England. I really lost it and was ensconced in grief and in therapy. And a friend invited me to New York. I was in England, where I'm from. And she invited me to New York. And when I was coming home, she gave me one of the books on the list and kind of introduced me to my journey. But even before then, actually, one of the books on my list is The Prophet.
That's
by
first
Khalil
on your
Gibran.
list, yes.
And I go back to that because Peter was still alive, but I was a bit of a mess. And in the computer industry, as a journalist, I was a journalist in the retail business. And it was so stressful because at that time, everything was getting smaller and faster and all these competing companies, and we were just on the go all the time. So it was a very stressful job. And this woman was over from America called Julia. And I knew nothing about spirituality or anything like that yet. And she gave me this book, and I was mesmerized by the language and the images and the message. So, and she had also written an inscription in there for me. May this bring, I can't read her writing.
I've got it here. May this bring insight and comfort to you.
Yes, may this bring insight and comfort to you. And this is like several years before Peter died. And yet it was one of the books that brought me peace and comfort. And I wasn't spiritually mindful or have language for what was in the book, but my heart resonated with it, so that when I got on my spiritual path, it made so much more sense. And I'm forever grateful for Julia to introduce me to my first spiritual book. I don't know where in the world she is. She left the country, went back to San Francisco, and we've never been in touch, but I've kept this book. It's all yellow and frayed at the edges, but I still have it on my bookshelf and love Khalil Gibran.
It is a beautiful, beautiful book. and it's ranks very highly on the most recommended list.
I bet.
Very highly. And I'm not surprised. I mean, so many people love this book. So that was the first spiritual book. Do you think that is the book that, pushed you onto your spiritual path? What was the trigger for that?
It wasn't a book that put me on my spiritual path, but they were my companions. So one of the books, my friend gave me a paperback copy of Acts of Faith by Iana Van Sant. She gave that to me with 3 other books on a daily word subscription. Sent me back to England, and wow, I'd never heard this kind of material before. And Acts of Faith was written primarily for people of color, a daily meditation for people of color, but it's still applicable to everyone. But I'd never heard some of the stuff in it and the quotes. And one of the quotes in this book that transformed my life, and I gave it to everybody. I know I bought it for everybody, but there's a reading in July. There's 3 of them in the middle of July, and it's people come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And then each day she breaks down the reason, the season, and then the third one is the lifetime. And that was so meaningful to me because it gave me a frame of reference. Again, I was still premature on my journey, but it gave me a frame of reference for what could have happened with Peter passing. He came into our lives, was a powerful personality, the linchpin of the family, a real family man. And his leaving left a huge hole. It was like a light went out. And I know people say that all the time, but it was my first experience of a light going out. And to know that people come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime was so helpful. That Peter is one of those lifetime people, although his physical presence is no longer here. And there'll be just gems like that all along the way. And as I said in my description, sometimes I read the book every year for several years, 365. And then sometimes I just dip into it when I need something. What's the reading for today? Let me see what Iana's saying today. And then other times I use it in my ministry and my work and so forth. I quoted her a lot when I first started my podcast back in 2009. So yeah.
Yeah, she's someone well worth quoting. She really is.
And sorry, I was going to say, she has this way that she speaks. It's like kick butt. And she can sometimes come across as irreverent, but it gets to you, you like,
and that's her charm.
Pay attention.
Yeah, that's part of her charm. And that particular book has sold nearly 1 million copies.
I am not surprised. And then she brought out a hard copy. Simon Schuster brought out this hard copy. It had the vellum cover on it, and it was just a beautiful design. So I bought myself a copy, inscribed it to myself from that one was from, oh my gosh, I can never find the quotes when I want them.
A
gift from self with a capital S to self, the smaller S, in honor of your greatness and beauty of spirit. Now, Sandie, for me to say that to myself back in the 90s was huge. To like accept that there is a part of me that the divine resides in, that I have this great spirit within me and I'm going to do great things in the world. Never would have been having those kinds of conversations. So I inscribed it to my higher self, inscribing it to my smaller self with the lower capital S, with a lower S. And then I bought that book for everybody that was dear to me. And many of them still have the book on their shelf like I do all these years later.
Yeah, there are some books you never get rid of.
And some you do because you want the message to go out to people like Julia, who gave me that book. I never know if a book I gave to somebody, how that would transform their lives. You know what I mean? So I will give away even the precious books.
You will. Even that particular one?
No. No, I'll find a copy in the bookstore.
Yeah. So book number 3 is a book that became part, you say, of your physical, mental, and emotional medicine chest, and it is Heal Your Body, The Mental Causes for Physical Illness and the Metaphysical Way to Overcome Them by Louise Hay. This was published in 1976.
Yeah, and I came across it a couple years after Peter died. Again, still a spiritual novice, but learning about metaphysics, learning about the power of our thought, the power of our word. And I became Louise Hay's biggest fan. And as I said in my description as well, I still have a copy of the book. My best friend Andrea still has a copy, and we get the sniffle or we get an ache or, oh, what's this pain? Let's see what the little blue book says. We do that before we go to the doctor.
Yes.
And then we affirm whatever the corresponding affirmation is when we realize that it could be something that is going on in our body that comes out of our thinking, out of our past, out of our trauma, out of unforgiveness, whatever that seems to be. And so I still love that book. And it's one of the first ones, but I've got several of hers now, but that was one of my first.
And you said that you love the loving treatment at the end of the book.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
I memorized it. There's this, it's like an affirmative treatment. I didn't know what that was then either, because she was religious science and I was unity, and we phrase things differently. So for me, I would call it an affirmative prayer treatment. But deep within my being, deep at the center of my being, there is an infinite well of love, and I now allow that love to flow to the surface. It fills my heart, my body, my mind, my consciousness, my very being, and radiates out from me in all directions and returns to me multiplied. That's just the first bit.
That's lovely. Yeah.
And I say I have it memorized, and then I go to say it, and of course my mind goes blank. So I always have it in front of me, but I just love that treatment. I share it with other people. And I love myself, so I take care of myself. I love myself, so I eat nourishing food and drink nourishing beverages. I love myself, so I forgive myself and others. It's just those phrases, again, just being so new, they hit home. My soul knew this stuff, but I'd never been exposed to it before. Yeah.
Book number 4, The Celestine Prophecy, An Adventure by James Redfield, published in 1984. And like many people, this one fell into your hands.
Yes, it did.
I love the way that books do that.
And I have a book, if I might digress, that literally fell into my hands. It's not on my list. I had to stop somewhere. But it was the Metaphysics of Dreams. And I was at the bus stop. I was rushing to work. My train was late. And now I'm at the bus stop. The buses aren't there. And I'm standing outside this bookstore. And I get this guidance, like a voice in my head, go into the bookstore. Like, no, I'm late. The bus will be here. Go into the bookstore. I go into the bookstore. No, now what? Now what? Go downstairs. Now what? Now what? I walk to the shelf. I don't even know what the shelf is and why I went there. And the book literally fell off the shelf. And I have used that dream book ever since. Like, I was a dreamer already. I'm sorry, I should have put this on the list now. I'm saying so much about it. But I was already a dreamer. And the metaphysics of the dreams is what this dictionary was helping with. And it was so good that I would use it for other metaphysical interpretation as well. So that was literally one that fell off my shelf, fell off the shelf for me. And I don't remember how, I don't remember in exact the same way how the Redfield book came to me, but it was very popular at the time. And I didn't realize it was self-published, because people were passing it around initially, especially in unity circles. They were passing it around and it kind of came to me, but I don't remember who or when. But I remember sharing it with my best friend. And I was at college taking an evening class in psychotherapy and counseling. And I'd get on the train and just be reading it until the next stop. And then class would finish on the train, just reading. I was just enthralled by the story, which, you know, it's a bit of a thriller and things happening and the chase. But the spiritual lessons in these 8 insights, my friend and I are still talking about these today. And to have language for something that's integral in my life, but I didn't realize it in quite the way it's described in these insights, the power of the energy, the ability to see the energy and feel the energy around us, around the plants. I didn't know all of that. I was feeling it, sensing it, because I'm an empath. Didn't have language for that either. And here was this book talking about things that I relate to. I know what this means. I didn't know there's a word for it or a phrase or an explanation for it, but I get it. It was like that.
Yeah. So, book number 5 is The Energy of Money, a spiritual guide to financial and personal fulfillment by Maria Nemeth, published in 1998.
Maria Nemeth. She has the same energy as Iyanla. So I was in seminary and she was bringing this workshop to the ministerial students, and I didn't have the money to go to the workshop, and I wrote to her and said that. And one of the prerequisites was you had to have the book, and you also had to buy the Book of Living and Dying.
The
Powerful
Tibetan
book.
book, yeah.
The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying.
Mm.
So anyway, I wrote to her and told her. So she said that if I could pay half, then she'd give me scholarship for the other half if I could come up with it. And that was such a powerful workshop, but you had to read the book before. And then the workshop was like a synopsis of that. Oh my gosh, where do I start? First of all, Maria is my coach, although I haven't spoken to her for years. Wherever she is, she's still my coach. Then I don't even know where to start with this book. There's so many things that have impacted my life because of the book and the course, including states of being. When I do a workshop or a retreat, I start with these states of being. Who am I willing to be in order to co-create an extraordinary experience? And then we come up with 3 to 5 adjectives and state those into the arena. I still do that. She introduced me to vision boards, and not the way that you hear about it in The Secret. I mean, this was in the workshop, you saw big grown people cry because one of the things you had to do with your vision board was you had to bring all your cut-ins for whatever it was. And in those days, back in the 90s, you had to cut out the letters to make a goal and then an intention, but you couldn't print it off on your computer. You had to go through magazines and cut out the letters, like my goal is to publish my first CD. So I will have my first CD published by, and then the date, to be a conscious communicator or something like that. And you have to cut out all those letters, paste them together, like the ransom letters of old.
Yes, yes.
And then you had to cut out 8 feeling words, how you will feel when the goal is accomplished. But it wasn't just about the pictures. It was this inner, internal, facing the trauma, the unforgiven state, the block. You didn't know what it was. And then in that workshop, someone else put your vision board together, and people were freaking out like, no, I want to do it myself. They don't know me. And they created these beautiful vision boards. Well, to this day, I still do that. And I have incorporated those into my work too. I do one-on-one sessions with people. And if you're coming for a creative, what's that book where you cut out your pictures and your sorry, my mind's going blank. When you have an album and you do, there's a word for that, crafting word. That's not what this is. We're doing deep, metaphysical, internal meditation, healing work, and your treasure map or your vision board comes out of that. So I have her to thank for that too. And that
How
book.
did it change your relationship with money?
With money. Well, that's part of it, right? Because it's about being conscious, it's about being aware, and it's about realizing that it's all abundance. So we think only the good stuff is abundant, only the nice things that happen, only when the money's flowing in, it's abundant, but it's all abundance. The scripture says, I've come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. And even those things that are traumatic, critical, chaotic, there's a gem in all of it. So there was that. And then knowing my net worth, facing my debt and not pretending it wasn't there, because I came from England with about £15,000 worth of debt, and I was a foreign student, not allowed to work, but still had to make those payments. So the inclination is to bury your head and pretend it's not there. So it's facing that, facing your net worth. My credit score is excellent today because of that book, and maintaining it was so important to me. It's like, oh no, I'm not going to do that to make my credit score go down. And just understanding money itself, but then the metaphysical relationship and the energy of how we deal with money. What she would say is that life is like a hologram. So the way you do one thing shows up in other areas of your life.
Yeah.
So how you're mistreating your money and your relationship with money is showing up in your relationships with other people. And then there was that idea of by the time we're 9, we have established our
our patterns.
our patterns. And so she did these practices in the workshop, and they're in the book as well, that helps us to be aware of those structures of knowing, is what she called them, and then how they're still showing up. Because as I said, what
Yes.
you do in one area shows up in another.
Yeah, I remember reading, this thing that by 9, the pattern's set, and most of us are walking around, and our accountant is a 9-year-old.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Interesting. Apparently, clinical psychologist, she once lost $35,000 in a fraudulent investment scheme, and
That's
she
right.
learned from that ordeal.
That's
Yeah,
where that money, energy of money came from. Because if
yeah,
it's too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true, and then we want it, and we want it now. So yeah,
yes, yeah,
that's where it came
yeah.
from.
So, book number 6, Finding Yourself in Transition, Using Life's Changes for Spiritual Awakening by Reverend Robert Brume. That was published in 1994.
Yes, and it was one of our textbooks when I was in seminary. It was part of our pastoral care. It was one of those books I love. He was my teacher, now he's my friend and colleague, Reverend Bromett. And I love the way he teaches and the way he outlines in the book, kind of using scripture as well along the way, but it's also psychology and how it's a bit like what I was saying earlier, really. There's a blessing and good in every situation. And it's hard to hear when you're going through it. But it was that boost I needed for when I was going through my seminary experience. But I come back to this book time and time again when I find myself in transition. And that's that description where you're in the hallway, where the door behind you's closed, you're heading to the light at the other end of the hallway, but the door is still closed at the other end and you're in the hallway. How do you work through that? It's almost like the biblical scripture was, how did the people of Israel manage when they were in the wilderness in transition? He uses that as the base, and then it's the metaphysics of that and the psychology of that. And it's beautifully written. It's not like heady or anything. And some of the best messages come in that simple language in books, don't they? Sometimes.
The
So
simpler,
anyway,
the better, and the more profound, I find.
yeah, and it's just his style. So he's a unity minister, but he's also a Buddhist, and so that gentle, thoughtful, mindful way of expressing, that's how he is, comes across in the book too. So it's a great solace for me if I read it again while I'm in transition, to hear his voice in my head, and I know I'm going to be okay. Yeah.
Book number 7, Sabbath, Restoring the Sacred Rhythm of Rest by Wayne Muller, 1999.
So again, this is in my description, but I finished seminary in 2001. I was ordained in 2001, stayed on for a year. And in that year, I was guided to go off and do a 40-day silent retreat. Like, what? The most I'd spent in silence was 3 days. And that was because it was an assignment for school. We had to spend 3 days in silence in our second year of seminary. I did have a practice where I was doing 1 day of silence every month, come what may. But 40 days, where does one even do that? Who's ever done that before? So then
Jesus.
I found, yeah. Yeah, and I got some advice from him too. But then the book Sabbath came into my hand, and it was reminding me, because I didn't know why I was being guided. I wasn't particularly stressed or anything. I was doing an internship. No, that's not true. I was doing an internship and I went back to school, evening classes, to finish my degree, my undergraduate degree. So yeah, there was a lot going on. But yeah, I suppose now I'm thinking about it. I was, at the time, was thinking, but I'm not that stressed, because you get used to the pace. But it's really important to have Sabbath time. And again, the way that Muller describes it and uses the stories and the examples and the meditations is so enriching. And there's a piece in there that I once heard a Unity minister quote in a sermon. And the way she put it was, in biblical times, you could be put to death for working on the Sabbath. It was punishable by death. And then she said, and it still is today. That's a pretty harsh way to put it. It's punishable by death, but not because of some ecclesiastical law, but because we work ourselves to death and we don't have time, create time for Sabbath. And it doesn't have to be a Sunday, it doesn't have to be a Saturday, it doesn't have to be a particular day of the week. It's about just coming apart and taking care of yourself with meditation, rest, self-care, because we wear this badge of honor. And I live in the States now, so it's easy to become your environment. And we just keep going. And it's a badge of honor that I didn't take my vacation and I work 7 days a week and I work 20 of the 24 hours a day and I'm so busy. It's like, no, it's going to be the death of you, In fact, there's a time when I first got to my job in America, and I, as I said, got on the working around the clock bandwagon, lost all this weight, didn't look good. And my big sister Helen saw a picture of me looking emaciated and stressed in my face. And she took a breath and she said, please take care of yourself because they can replace you, but we can't. Mm-hmm. And stress is the number one killer in this country. We need to take time to take care of ourselves. Yeah. So I still have Sabbath on my credenza. Not that I read it as much as some of the other books I mentioned that I dip into, but it's just like this red flag, always in my line of eyesight. Yeah. Remember to take the Sabbath. And I still do. Since January 2000, every month I carve out an entire day that is my Sabbath silence. And I have what's now a media fast, but we didn't have the phrase for it then. And I'll just spend time in sacred silence for one day a month.
So we're going to take a short break now. You're listening to a No BS Spiritual Book Club interview, and sharing the 10 books that had the biggest influence on her life journey is founder of Touching the Stillness Ministries, meditation teacher, Unity minister, retreat facilitator, and podcast host Paulette Pipe, who has presented at and led meditations at many events, including IONS and the Parliament of World Religions conferences. We'll be back with the rest of Paulette Pipe's 10 best spiritual books, along with more of her story after the break.
OMTimes TV.
Maya Angelou once said that there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and when I'm not hosting OMTimes Media's flagship radio show What Is Going On and the No BS Spiritual Book Club, I help people share their untold stories. Books are my life, my joy and my passion, and there is no greater reward than helping aspiring writers get their books out of their heads and into the hands of those who are waiting to read them. If you feel that you have a book in you but don't know where to begin, visit Sedgbeer.com, click on the Work With Me tab and find out how my experience helping others tell their stories might be just what you've been looking for. That's Sedgbeer.com, SEDGBEER.com.
Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. OMTimes Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, OMTimes offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an OMTimes magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on OMTimes TV and broadcasting it across the extensive OMTimes radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. OMTimes. Open yourself to the possibilities.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Welcome back. Paulette Pipe, book number 8. Very interesting one. Healing Mudras, Yoga for Your Hands by Sabrina Mesko, published in 2000.
Yes, I saw this one at the Unity bookstore, and at the time I had just started doing Kundalini yoga, which I don't practice anymore, but at the time had just been introduced to, and it was my practice for several years. So I knew about the mudras and the different hand positions our teacher would guide us through. But there was something about this book when I saw it that like, oh, this is really important. And so I started practicing using the mudras in Sabrina's book, and then I started introducing them to some of the participants at the retreat where I was interning. And yeah, the rest is history, as they say, because I've created, in Unity, we have this practice of 12 powers, which is a bit like the chakra system, but there's 12 and they're aligned with each of the disciples. And so I created mudras to help strengthen those centers through mudras. And then there's a chakra version. And then I have a workshop called The Power is in Your Hands. It was really interesting as well, if I may share this story, because I'd been doing this mudra workshop and these practices, adding them into meditation practices so much that I decided to, when I do the next workshop, have a handout. And I invited a friend of mine who's a colleague, but also a photographer, to photograph. Well, actually, I was saying I can't do it because I can't find the hands. This is way back when. And she said, why don't we do yours? No, not my hands. But anyway, she talked me into it, and she came over and to the office, and we set everything up. And she was getting ready to take the first photograph, and I went like this. It's like, okay, let's turn the camera off. Tell me what's going on, what's happening. And from nowhere, I didn't even know this was in me. I looked at my hands and I said, some of the fingers on my hands are paternal and some of the fingers on my hands are maternal. And they come from a lineage where my people worked their fingers to the bones and died in poverty, even though they were working so hard. And they also represent hands that punished. And all this just spilled out of me. And we took a moment, both being prayerful, we just took a moment, cleared the energy, said a prayer, and I had a healing right there, because I would never show my hands. They would always like, they're not good enough to show, they're not pretty enough to show, they're not, but I love my hands. And I'm so grateful for this practice that led me to that healing. But then there are so many other healings that come through using mudras. Mudras to help relieve anxiety and
pain and depression.
pain. Yeah, and I find them very centering. And some of them show up in my mind gems. Like there's this one, and that shows up as one of the, not mind gems, one of the brain gems from that genre. So I just love them.
How?
Can I show you one of my favorite ones?
I was going to say, can you show me the pain one and then show me your favorite one, because I'm sure a lot of people would like to.
I haven't got the pain one at my fingertips, no pun intended.
Okay, you haven't got it to hand.
I've got it to hand, but I have one that's very centering, and you place your palm is open with your thumb tucked against the side of your hand, and it's just around the solar plexus, and then you make a fist with the other hand and place it on top, so it's like a cup and saucer, and then you lift the right hand thumb up like an antenna and just rest it here, elbows are parallel, and you if you try that, it's just so centering. It's called the Shiva Linga Mudra. And then there's another one for developing concentration. And these are sort of familiar to us. And then there's Gyan Mudra, which we're very familiar with when we're doing meditation.
Yes. What about the Heal a Broken Heart Mudra?
Again, I haven't had cause to try that one.
Okay.
And then there's this one that we all know, which is the Anjali Mudra. We see that a lot, thumbs on the sternum and prayer position. That this particular mudra is throughout all religions. And that was the thing about it. As I got into it more, so many faiths and religions use mudras or their equivalent. Our hands are used in prayer and devotion, and we're not even conscious of it some of the time. Even the giving and the receiving as well. So, yeah.
Sabrina Mesco was a former ballerina and a Broadway dancer and model, and she turned to yoga to heal a back injury.
Yes.
Yeah. And
so that's the one piece that I kept from the Kundalini tradition, Kundalini yoga tradition.
And wasn't she the first person entrusted with bringing the sacred mudra techniques to the West?
I don't know if she was the first person, because Yogi Bhajan had a lot of the mudras in his practice, and he's one of the first to have brought Kundalini yoga to the West. Yeah.
So book number 9, Wisdom of a Lifetime, How to Get the Bible Off the Shelf and Into Your Hands by Alden Studebaker, 1998.
Yes, he's a colleague, a fellow Unity minister. And I was in England when his book came out, waiting to come to seminary. So to come to seminary, you have to go through 2 layers. One of them is to become a licensed Unity teacher. So I was already licensed, and I had applied and was waiting for my application to be accepted to come to seminary in the States. And this book comes into my hand when all this information's in my head of metaphysics and Bible, because that's one of the things about Unity, is that we teach the Bible as a metaphysical tool. The stories are our own, and they can apply in modern times when we look through the metaphysical lens, which is beyond appearance, beyond the story and the analogies. And then this book comes into my hand, and it's saying everything my teachers have said in school, but he again puts it in layman terms, that you don't have to be a scholar, and it gives examples of all the different Bibles, the concordances, the maps. It kind of brings the whole thing together, takes the mystique out of it. And like Acts of Faith, I started buying it for everybody. They must have thought I was nuts. But I was so like, I know you don't read the Bible, or you might be scared of the Bible, or can't understand the Bible. This will really help. And I know one of the people I gave it to was my sister-in-law. And when I go to visit her, I still see it on her bookshelf too, right next to her Bible. So it makes me feel good that it had some use somewhere. Yeah.
So book number 10 is a beautiful one to end your list on. 29 Gifts, How a Month of Giving Can Change Your Life by Cami Walker, published in 2009.
This book, I think I might have seen her story in a magazine or something. I can't remember. Then I bought the book and got into her story. And her story was very powerful. She was 33 years old, just married a month. She'd actually been in a very stressful job. And every time she had different symptoms, she would go to the doctor and they say, oh, it's just stress. It's just stress. And they'd give her medication. But a month after her wedding, they found out she had MS. And she was distraught, of course. And then every time she had symptoms, as it progressed very quickly, she lost eyesight, lost her mobility. It was all happening very quickly. And every time she had symptoms again, she'd go to the ER, and they'd give her medications for that particular symptom. And then she found a neurologist, a wonderful neurologist, who said, we don't know if you're having some of this pain and reaction to all the drugs you've been given for symptoms, or if it's MS symptoms. So you need to go for an 8-day detox. And she was addicted to the medication by this time. So the night before the detox, she calls her friend and mentor, Mbali, who's also British, but she's a South African healer living with a British accent. And she's kind of looking for some support, someone to collude with, I would say. And Barley listens to her and then says, you know, you need to get out of your own way, out of your own head. You're thinking about yourself. Like, of course, I'm not well. Of course, I'm thinking about myself. So she says, I'm going to give you an uncommon prescription. Give away 29 gifts for 29 days. And Cammie's like, this is stupid. First of all, I'm not feeling well and I'm going into hospital tomorrow. Where am I going to get 29 gifts? And how can giving away some pocket change my life? And so Barley talks her through the process. It's something you do to take the attention off yourself. And you also keep a journal. So you keep track of the gifts. And as you're giving the gifts, you're not doing it for this reason, but good and blessings and other things come into your life. Well, Cammie is not impressed. And she writes in her journal, 29 gifts for 29 days, closes the book and puts it aside, says goodnight, and that's it. Well, a few months after the detox, she has chronic insomnia, which is one of her symptoms. So she gets up to journal and the book opens, give away 29 gifts for 29 days. And so the book is her journal journey of the gifts that she gave and what happened and how she came up with a gift when she didn't know what to give that day. And then it turned into a challenge because she would invite her family and friends to join her. And then she set up a website. People got involved. This is back in 2009. And there was this website with ideas and people sharing what they did. And I was on that bandwagon. I did the 29 Gifts Challenge in January 2010. And then in February 2010, I also had a podcast as a guest. And then a few years later, I did it a third time. And it's amazing. I mean, I was just talking about it this weekend, actually, in a speaking engagement. And I did things like, I remember I was going on another speaking engagement. I had to drive and I didn't have the gas. I didn't have enough petrol. So I didn't have enough money for petrol, but I was going to get a gift as part of my speaker's fee. So what I did was I put half of the money of petrol in my car. And then I went into the petrol station and I said, could you put this on the pump that I'm on for the person who pulls up behind me? And this poor guy was so confused. He didn't know what I was talking about because it was just not a done thing. We got there in the end. And so I left half the money on the pump. And then when I got to my speaking engagement, someone gave me a gift. And then there was another time where, okay, we have a snowstorm in Missouri where I live now. They're not snowstorms, they're ice storms. They're like ice rinks on your car, on the pavement, and so it's freezing cold temperatures. We've got the ice, and I don't know how to share my gift that day. And so then I was guided to write a letter to my mail carrier because my mailbox is across the street. And they have to come out, whether it's an ice storm, a snowstorm, 100 degrees temperature in the summer, they have to come and deliver the mail. So I wrote a beautiful thank you letter for coming anyway. You know, I know it's your job, but you have to be out here. And I can choose not to go and get my mail on any particular day. Mm. And then I wrapped up in my blanket and my coat and my thick boots and inched my way across the street and taped it on my box so that she would see it. And that was my gift that day. So it doesn't have to be money. It doesn't have to be big, but it makes a difference. And because I just shared it this weekend with a spiritual community, on Monday, I started again. I'm doing the 29 days again.
Why 29?
We don't know. She doesn't know. And Barley never told her. We don't know why it's 29, but it does make a difference. It changes your perspective, and it changed her life. And then all those lives that she touched. And then I found out recently that she passed during the pandemic in 2020. So yeah, powerful book. I encourage anyone to engage in that. And especially if you don't think you have anything to give.
Yeah.
It's not about the giving and you're not doing it out of a sense of obligation. It's just a way to lift your appearance. Again, I think of that story of Jesus feeding the multitude with 5 loaves and 2 fish. And one of the things he does in the story is he lifts his vision above what's in front of him and says, I know you hear me often and bless what I have, kind of paraphrasing. And it was enough to feed everybody. Well, that's a macrocosm of what can happen when we're giving. We think we have nothing. We think our life is in dire straits. But there's a transformation in there if we're willing to see it and open to it. But yes, love this book, 29 Gifts.
Well, that's your 10 best list. Let's talk about you. Professional keeper of the flame. You know, one has a visual of you walking around with a candle everywhere. What does this mean?
I do have a candle that I carry around everywhere, and it resides in my heart. There's a biblical scripture that says the spirit of man is like the candle of the Lord, illuminating the darkest parts. And so that's, yes, I do carry that light in my heart. But what that is I'm a professional space holder. So as an empath, I am able to hold the energy in a meeting, in a business meeting. In fact, I was the keeper of the flame for Unity Worldwide Ministries Board of Trustees for 9 years. I was a board member, but I was a non-voting board member. So I would begin by creating a sacred space, including my states of being from Maria Nemus' work. But we'd also do meditation and prayer. And once the arena was set, the energy was set, then I would hold that. And I could feel the shift and change. I could feel when people were disconnected, when people were in a mood, or something was said or done that they didn't approve of, but they weren't saying it physically. But the energy of it pervades the room. And I could feel that. So I could work with that to keep clearing it. And what that does is help them to stay on task, stay focused, because you may not be aware of what the impact of the energy is. You're having a response to it, but you don't know, you're not conscious of what it is. So it will slow you down. There'll be dissent and all that kind of stuff going on in the room. So I'm able to keep it balanced and clear. And I can do that one-to-one or in meetings or whatever. Yeah.
It sounds like something that should be adopted in governments, by government.
Yes, I think I should be in the Senate, in the Congress. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, you'd get those laws passed.
And was it you that was telling me one time when we were speaking about the accolades that were in the marketplace, holding
the acolytes in the marketplace? Yes, I read this in a book about conscious money, and apparently I don't know how true it is, but in the marketplace, acolytes who were studying, to be ministers or whatever they were, one of the things they had to do was to sit in the marketplace and hold the energy so that they would keep a nice, clean balance of energy, so there'd be no arguments, no disagreements, no fights, etc. And I thought that was really interesting.
So it's very similar, and that's the gift I want to bring to commerce and to areas of commercial activity. That same energy and idea, but I'm doing it in my own way. Like I'm a keeper of the flame, as you mentioned in my intro, for Evolutionary Leaders, and there are many networks and thought leaders, activists, spiritual leaders in those groups. So by serving at the Evolutionary Leaders level, I am supporting those leaders and their organizations. It's kind of rippling out. Yeah.
So tell me now about your nonprofit, Touching the Stillness. I mean, you've said that meditation is your soul's gift and your life purpose. I mean, lots of people become meditation teachers. I don't know anyone other than you who've said, this is my soul purpose.
Thank you for that question. And it goes back to Peter, my brother. So when my friend invited me, when I told my friend that Peter had died and she invited me to New York for Christmas, and that was my intro to spirituality, we went to a Unity church and I heard this thing called meditation. Now I'm 29 years old and I don't know anything about Buddhism or Hinduism or contemplative Christianity. I know nothing of that. And I hear this meditation and my soul has a reaction like, oh, what is this? And so I kept going back to New York every opportunity I got so I could go to her church to do this thing called meditation. And then through some research, I found that we had this same organization in England, actually near Victoria Station. We used to meet near Victoria Station. And so in that particular community, they would meet in the afternoons so that people could go to their ordinary denominations in the morning and then come to Unity in the afternoon. And Unity would have this 30-minute meditation right before the service. And I would go to that and just bask in it and just like, this is so familiar to me. I've never done it. I've never heard of it, but I'm just so familiar with this. And I remember one of the teachers who was a regular teacher said that she was going on vacation and that the minister was looking for someone to take her place while she was away. Sandie, I kid you not, it was like my body catapulted out of the chair, and I'm standing in front of this man I hardly know, and I say, I can do this. And he looks at me like I've lost my mind, and as I said, never done it at home, never tried it, never meditated. The only time I meditate is on a Sunday when I go to this gathering. So he said no, but my soul knew. And I've not been formally trained. I've obviously going through seminary, we've, been exposed to practices, and then on the path, I'm exposed to many different practices. But at that time, I had no training, no workshops. It was just I'd open my mouth and the words would come out, the practice would come out. And as I began then to practice meditation consciously and mindfulness, it changed my vocals. So much so that my very family say to me, oh my God, that voice. Now, we grew up together, so if I had that voice, it wouldn't be remarkable. But now, the practice and the work I do to amplify the energy gift and everything I have change the quality of my voice. And so that's what I'm known for as well, the meditation, mindfulness, and my voice. So Touching the Stillness is my vehicle through which I serve and make those offerings available.
And you've got 3 albums out of meditations?
Yes.
Yeah.
Touching the Stillness, Resting in Stillness, and Blissful Stillness.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah. So there was something else I was going to ask you. I've just got to try and remember what it was. It's gone. A question we ask all of our guests is, if you could pick one person from your list of authors that you could have dinner with or spend some time with, who would it be?
Can I have 2? Can we
No.
have...
No, you can't. You've had 11
Can I have dinner with one and dessert with the other?
Well, who are the 2?
It would be Janla and Louise.
And Louise. Yeah. All right, I'll let you have 2.
Thank you. Dinner with Janla.
Yeah.
She'll crack me up.
She will indeed.
And then dessert with Louise, because that'd be a nice way to ease out of the beautiful meal.
Yeah. I've remembered what I wanted to ask you about. You're a teacher for Insight Timer.
Yes.
How does that work?
How does that work?
How do you become a teacher?
You become a teacher because of providence, because someone mentions your name and they contact you and said, we'd like you to be a teacher. And at the time they had like 8,000 of them.
Wow.
And so they invited me to be.
Honor.
Yes, it was. So they invited me to be a teacher. And then they had this beta test where they were going to start doing live events. This is before the pandemic. And for some reason, my name got picked as one of the 100 people, 120 people out of, again, thousands of teachers. And so I kept my live event going. Then we went through the pandemic, so it was pertinent then too. And so I have this live event where we have the breathing space for noble silence. And every Wednesday, 1:00 Central Time, we come together. We do a meditation. It's evolved over time, but now it's a meditation to help calm our nervous system. Then we turn our attention outward to what's going on around the planet. And every week there's something, just like there is this week with Israel, or
Yes.
whether it's Afghanistan or the Ukraine or whatever. And it's not just war, but all the places and all the things happening. We turn our attention outward and we send a blessing. And then we go inward and we hold noble space, because that's where the work of the divine is really taking place. And we hold this noble silence on their behalf, standing in proxy for them, because they're in survival mode and we're holding that space for them. So I still do that. And then I have offerings, meditations, little affirmative prayers and things on my page, on my Insight Timer page. Yeah.
So tell me, meditation, many people say, I love it. Many people say, I just can't do it. What do you say to the people who say, I can't do it?
I say there's more than one way to meditate, and that is the premise of my entire ministry, is surprising people that they already meditate and they don't know it because they think it's sitting on a mountain with their fingers in the Gyan Mudra chanting Om. And there are many gateways. Actually, it's not about the meditation so much for me as it is going into stillness where the work is done. There are many paths and gateways to do that. You can do it somatically through your body. You might be doing Qigong, Tai Chi, dancing, yoga. You can do it through the chanting, the various ways to chant. You can do it through, you can be gardening. Have you ever had an experience where you're so entrained in the moment that time stops still?
Yeah.
And then the thing to do is when you stop the activity, then you've entered the stillness. You're not struggling, you're not trying. So use those as your gateways. And then when you get used to that, 5 minutes, 10 minutes of stillness, then you can start exploring other practices where you feel, you know, you might be in alignment with that genre.
Do you think there's a difference between meditation and contemplation?
Actually, contemplation is one of your pathways. So there's something called centering prayer, for example, where you might use a word or a phrase and you focus on it. And every time your mind wanders, you come back to it. That's a contemplative practice that will take you into the stillness. It's part of the meditative path, I think.
Mm. Paulette, where can people find you?
On touchingthestillness.org. It's my website, or YouTube, Paulette at Touching the Stillness.
And do you post some of your meditations on YouTube?
Yes, that's what that channel is for. Yes.
Okay. Paulette Pipe, thank you for adding your 10 best list to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's library of recommendations.
Thank you for inviting me. It was such an adventure. Thank you.
Good, I'm glad. Paulette Pipe's 10 best list can be found at the nobsspiritualbookclub.com. And as she said, you can learn more about her at touchingthestillness.org. That's it for this week. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and I'll be back at the same time next week with another 10 best interview for the No BS Spiritual Book Club. Till then, it's goodbye from me, and thank you to Paulette Pipe.